Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, Korea's ruling and opposition parties continue to lock horns over the spy agency's involvement in last year's presidential election. Reports are emerging that the two sides may have agreed to extend the 45-day election probe. Japan's nuclear watchdog warns of a new emergency situation surrounding the buildup of radioactive water from the Fukushima nuclear plant. This after plant operator TEPCO recently admitted contaminated water has leaked into the Pacific Ocean. Plus, 2 U.S. senators arrive in Cairo in an effort to mediate between Egypt's interim government and supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsy. The U.S. Deputy Secretary of State meets with the imprisoned deputy of Morsy's Muslim Brotherhood. Daybreak begins now.
Good to have you with us. You're watching Daybreak on Tuesday, August 6th here in Seoul, and I'm GeunHye. We begin this morning with the latest from the parliamentary probe into the National Intelligence Service's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election. The head of the spy agency appeared before a parliamentary investigative committee Monday for questioning, but the ruling and opposition lawmakers were asking questions remained, and their questions remain divided over who is to blame for the latest political standoff. Our Kim Young-gil starts us off.
Chief of the National Intelligence Service Nam Jae-jun appeared for questioning before the parliamentary committee overseeing the probe on Monday. Although the briefing was not made public, speeches by the spy agency chief and 4 lawmakers from both rival parties were released. In his remarks, NIS Chief Nam apologized for creating a nationwide scandal and said the agency would work toward regaining its credibility. However, the lawmakers from the 2 rival parties at the briefing were split over who was responsible.
I believe that this was a failed political maneuvering by the Democratic Party, as they tried to use the National Intelligence Service to interfere with the presidential election.
It's not possible for the spy agency chief to have disclosed the inter-Korean summit transcripts alone. If he did, he should be held accountable. If the president knew this, then the president should also apologize to the people.
The 2 parties are still at odds over the witness list for the probe and whether to extend the parliamentary probe beyond the self-imposed deadline of August 15th. Meanwhile, to end the political deadlock over the NIS scandal, Hwang Woo-yeol, chairman of the ruling Saenuri Party, proposed 3-way talks on Monday with President Park Geun-hye and the opposition leader. The Democratic Party said it was open to talk if the president agrees. The presidential office of Cheongwade has not yet responded to the proposal. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
We're getting reports now that the 2 parties have tentatively agreed to extend the 40-day election probe, as well as guaranteeing witness testimonies from the former chiefs of the NIS and the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency. We'll bring you more details later in the day. President Park Geun-hye has, in a surprise move, chopped and changed several of her senior secretaries on Monday. She also replaced her chief of staff. Our Han Da-eun takes a look at what motivated the shakeup.
President Park Geun-hye's reshuffle of senior presidential secretaries was larger in scale than expected. The appointment of a new Secretary for Political Affairs was forthcoming, as the post had been left empty for 2 months. But to the surprise of many, President Park replaced her Chief of Staff as well as 4 of her key senior aides. As her new Chief of Staff, the President has tapped 3-term lawmaker Kim Ki-chun, who has served as the Prosecutor General and the Justice Minister. And she named former South Korean ambassador to the European Union Park Jun-woo as her new Senior Political Affairs Secretary. Along with these posts, replacements for the Senior Presidential Secretary for Civil Affairs, Secretary for Future Strategy, and Secretary for Employment and Welfare were also announced. Analysts say the moves reflect President Park's will to punish her former aides for a series of scandals and the inability to resolve pending political issues such as the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit transcript controversy. Now, former Chief of Staff Ho Tae-yeol is known to have taken a moderate stance towards most state affairs, something insiders say was not in harmony with President Park's hardline policies at times. Watchers say the reshuffle shows President Park's efforts to pick up new momentum for her political affairs in the latter half of the year. Amid worsening conflicts between the ruling and opposition parties over the summit transcript issue, experts say the president was trying to find middle ground by appointing career diplomat Park Jun-woo, who hasn't been involved much in domestic politics, as her new Secretary for Political Affairs. Pundits add that the new faces in the fields of civil affairs, economy, and welfare suggest that President Park is making a push to produce more tangible results from her key campaign pledges. 한다은, Arirang News.
It has been a week after Seoul gave Pyongyang an ultimatum for final dialogue on the joint industrial complex in Kaesong. But the communist state has remained tight-lipped on the offer for talks. With no clear answer from the North, the South Korean government says its patience is wearing thin. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Seung-hee has more on the impasse.
Getting neither a yes nor a no from the North on its week-old proposal to continue talks on reopening their joint business park, South Korea reiterated its call for a response on Monday, saying its patience is running thin.
We called through our inter-Korean hotline at 9 a.m. this morning, and there was no answer. So we are urging the North to show its will through actions rather than silence.
South Korea made its final proposal last Monday for a seventh round of talks on resuming operations at the Kaesong Industrial Complex, but the North has yet to respond. The two Koreas have held 6 rounds of working-level discussions last month on reopening the jointly run factory zone in the north, but have so far failed to reach an agreement. South Korea wants the North to guarantee it will never again unilaterally shut down the complex as it did 4 months ago, while the North is pushing for an immediate resumption of operations with no preconditions. Seoul has warned it will undertake a grave measure if Pyongyang does not agree to such safeguards, and many believe it could be considering a complete closure of the complex. With some 53,000 North Korean workers working for 123 South Korean firms, the complex is seen as the last remaining symbol of economic cooperation between the two Koreas. More than 100 South Korean businesses with factories in Kaesong have filed for a total of $250 million in insurance claims, an amount that Seoul plans to pay off beginning this week. Once the payments are made, the ownership of the factories and related assets will be handed over to the government. Hwang Seung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's ballooning household debt is projected to break through a less than enviable milestone in the near future, 1 quadrillion won, or roughly $900 billion. The country's household debt stood at around $860 billion as of the end of first quarter. The Bank of Korea has yet to announce its second quarter figure, but it's likely to hit a new record high as more Koreans rush to borrow money to rent and buy houses before the expiration of a property acquisition tax break at the end of June. The country's market has long been a destination for Chinese investors, but never like this. Korea's Financial Supervisory Service reported Monday that Chinese investments in the Korean stock, bond, and real estate markets reached 19.8 trillion won, or about $18 billion as of the end of June. That's a 40-fold jump since the end of 2008, and the trend is likely to continue as the Chinese government has plans to soon let individuals invest directly in foreign securities. However, the development is a double-edged sword for Korea. While the increased presence of Chinese investors helps to diversify foreign capital in the local market, its increasing dependence on Chinese capital makes the market vulnerable in the event that capital suddenly leaves.
if you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiation.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a.
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday that a plane over-operated by Korean Air overran the runway at Niigata Airport in Japan Monday evening, but no injuries have been reported. According to Japanese broadcaster NHK, Korean Air Flight 763 from Seoul landed at Niigata at 7:40 p.m. but overshot the runway. Japanese authorities are investigating the cause of the accident. Japan's tsunami-crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant is facing yet another emergency as highly radioactive groundwater appears to have risen above an underground barrier meant to contain it. The head of the country's Nuclear Regulatory Authority Task Force, Shinji Kinzo, told Reuters on Monday that the leak was an emergency, but he was worried the plant's operator, TEPCO, had no sense of how to deal with it. He went on to say the highly radioactive groundwater is likely seeping into the sea. Some Japanese media outlets have predicted the contaminated water could breach the ground surface in the matter of just a few weeks. Just last week, TEPCO estimated a cumulative 20 to 40 trillion becquerels of radioactive tritium may have leaked into the sea since the disaster some 2.5 years ago. With Egypt in full-on transition mode since the overthrow of Mohamed Morsy last month, two U.S. Republican senators have flown in from Washington to join ongoing negotiations over the direction Egypt should take. John McCain and Lindsey Graham were sent to Cairo at President Barack Obama's request. The senators are scheduled to meet with interim President Adli Mansour, Defense Minister General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and interim Foreign Minister Nabil Fahmy. They will also sit down with Morsy's supporters to try and bring the two sides back to the negotiating table. Prior to his departure, Graham told CNN that the Egyptian military must quickly turn control to civilian organizations and the groundwork should be laid for democratic elections. The issue of whether or not to continue U.S. aid to Egypt is likely to come up during talks, but both McCain and Graham have been vocal supporters of keeping the money flowing. Moving on to Syria, contrary to what the government there says, activists claim military missiles have been killing hundreds of civilians in recent months, including children. In a report by the U.S.-based Human Rights Watch on Monday, at least 215 people have been killed over the last 6 months from ballistic missiles fired by the Syrian military. The watchdog investigated 9 missile attacks and found nearly half of the casualties were children. The Syrian government has repeatedly denied targeting civilians, saying its troops are fighting terrorists hiding in civilian areas. Researchers have developed a new drug candidate that has shown promising signs of curing tuberculosis. The team, made up of mostly Koreans, says it could potentially help prevent thousands of deaths each year. Our Kim Min-ji reports on the medical discovery.
Although once thought to have been eradicated, tuberculosis still kills hundreds of thousands of people around the world each year, and is second only to HIV as the greatest killer worldwide due to a single infectious agent. More than 2,000 people die from TB in Korea each year, and the country has the highest rate of contraction in the OECD. There are 2 existing treatments for TB, but they have increasingly become inadequate as they were developed over 40 years ago, and multi-drug-resistant TB is now present almost everywhere. The new drug candidate, however, will likely curb further outbreaks of the infectious disease, thanks to its ability to inhibit the bacteria that causes TB. Animal tests have shown 99.9% efficacy and also excellent effectiveness to drug-resistant TB. The researchers screened hundreds of thousands of chemical compounds for their ability to inhibit tuberculosis growth and destroy the tuberculobacillus without harmful side effects. During the process, they identified molecules that killed the infectious agent without harming the cells.
It is meaningful that we have developed a new drug candidate and proved that the substance has new mechanisms.
The researchers say the development of the new drug candidate will treat latent tuberculosis, as well as shorten the treatment period for patients.
We will likely conduct clinical tests early next year. After the tests, the medication will be available for patients to use.
In the meantime, the researchers plan to continue to screen new molecules to find more candidate tuberculosis drugs. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
In the northern part of Korea's Gangwon province, a hotspot has emerged for festivals, ones ranging from tomato wrestling to winter ice fishing. Keeping with the tradition, Hwacheon County is now hosting its annual Rafting Festival. Our Paul Lee dives headfirst into the aquatic festivities.
Pumping over 3,700 liters of water per minute, this recreational jetpack allows users to fly through the air at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour. It's just one of the many activities available here at the Hwacheon Chokbe Festival in Gangwon Province.
You're really flying up into the sky. It's definitely appealing. Although it looks difficult, anybody who receives about 15 to 30 minutes of training can do it.
Held near the Pungosum Island area, the popular festival kicked off earlier this week under the theme Clear and Abundant Water of Hwacheon. Another featured water activity at the 16-day-long event is cable skiing. Unlike traditional water skiing where someone is pulled by a motorboat, cable skiing allows wakeboarders to be pulled by a series of electric-powered cables.
One advantage is that it's eco-friendly because it uses electricity, which means people can go for an inexpensive ride. It's such a popular sport overseas that's being considered as an event at the 2020 Olympics.
There's also plenty of activities for land lovers that want to stay high and dry. Cross-river zip lines give participants the chance to feel the wind rushing through their hair.
I feel like I'm trembling here because I don't know if I can do this. No, wait, I think I'm able to go through with this. I totally believe in myself. Okay, let's go.
Outdoor music concerts, kayaking tours, and paddleboat rentals are all part of the festival as well. It's a great way to stay cool this summer, but you may want to get that bathing suit ready soon as the festival ends on August 11th. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all, and probably a great Tuesday morning for the South Korean national basketball team who went up against Bahrain in the round of 12 matchup. Of course, Korea looking to qualify for the World Basketball Championships for the first time in 16 years. Really needs to get all the wins they can. Of course, with the Asian Basketball Championships taking place in Manila, South Korea goes absolutely insane on the offense, with Cho Sang-min and Kim Sun-young putting up 14 points each as South Korea takes this game 96-51. Of course, with Korea taking on Kazakhstan later tonight and India on Wednesday, getting those wins will secure a spot in the round of 8. And speaking of the South Korean national team, the South Korean football team is still without a win under the helm of the newly appointed manager Hong Myung-bo. Of course, a lot of things to be done before the World Cup in Brazil, but for now, his focus is on the roster for the upcoming warm-up match against Peru. With manager Hong Myung-bo set to announce the roster for the upcoming warm-up match against Peru, the big question is whether or not he'll bring in Park Ji-young. With the South Korean strikers' status still uncertain over in Europe, hasn't been getting any of the playing time so far, which puts manager Hong Myung-bo in a tough spot. However, with the manager hoping to bring in just 2 European players, Park might be the available option. Of course, no baseball here in the nation on Monday. So with the new week of KBO kicking off later tonight, let's take a look at the standings so far this season. Of course, taking a look at the standings here. First off, the Samsung Lions holding on to their first place spot as they take a 3-game lead over the second place LG Twins. Nexon continues to struggle, but they're still in third place with the red-hot Doosan Bears just trailing Samsung by 6 games so far. And now moving over to the bottom half of the league, the Lotte Giants in 6th place, but 3 games behind the Doosan Bears, with the Kia Tigers falling fast, already 11 games behind the leaders. Meanwhile, SK, NC, and Hanwha Eagles stay the same at the bottom of the league. And staying in the KBO with the new week of baseball kicking off later tonight, as I mentioned earlier, let's take a look at some of the key matchups taking place this week. That's going to be a big week of baseball for the 4th place Doosan Bears as they kick off the 2-game series against the 3rd place Nexon Heroes at home in Jamsil. The 2 games can switch around the standings if the Doosan Bears can sweep the series. And another big series for the Doosan Bears over the weekend as they're set to face off against the 2nd place LG Twins as well. With the 2 teams close in the standings, it's much more than a sole rivalry. Well, it's no surprise that some of the KBO players have been getting a ton of interest from the Major League scouts, and if you've been watching the Samsung Lions games, there's a good chance that there were many scouts on hand. With the Samsung Lions closer SeungHwan in his last year of his contract, many scouts from Japan and the US have been watching him carefully throughout the season. But according to one scout, is yet to prove himself to be a solid closer in the majors and, at best, a middle reliever. And with that said, that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. See you guys again, once again, for your sports needs.
Good morning, I'm GeunHye with your latest weather updates. Well, we had a strong sudden showers in the late afternoon yesterday with lightning and thunderstorm here in the capital, and of course it was very muggy. Now today's weather condition will pretty much be a copy of yesterday. We'll continue to have a risk of 1 or 2 passing showers in the afternoon in Seoul and the surrounding area, and hot spells will persist throughout the day. Now, as we can see, the heat wave warning and advisories are all over the places in Korea. So regions with the darker colors are dealing with the heat wave warnings, and the regions with the lighter colors pretty much dealing with heat wave advisory. Now, so we need to stay hydrated and try to avoid being outdoors in the afternoon. And it looks like hot weather will keep the nation scorching tomorrow as well, with plenty of sunshine, so it's going to be hotter tomorrow. Now, meteorologists predicting this summer to be the hottest of all. Searing heat wave can be ahead of us. We usually go through readings for 8 regions in Korea together, and you'll see in a second 5 out of 8 places will be hiking up to 33. So let's take a closer look at those numbers. The capital will hike up to 32. That's 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and Daegu will be hiking up to 35. Gwangju and Busan will be making up to 33. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju, Daejeon, and Mount Kumgang will be making up to 33, and Dokdo will be slightly cooler at 30. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me at this hour. Enjoy your morning commute and have a wonderful Tuesday.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour. Thank you for being with us.